Once upon a time, in the quiet village of Ukaru, there lived a young man called Obina. Obina was known for his strength and hard work in Ukaru village. His hands were skilled, and he was famous for being one of the best carpenters in the village. He built strong houses, carved beautiful chairs, and crafted tools that the villagers admired. Many people in the village respected him. Obina was a kind-hearted man, always ready to help others, and his tall, muscular frame made him stand out in the village. But despite all this, Obina was lonely. The women in the village admired him from a distance because of his good looks and quiet nature. Many of them wanted to be with him until they found out about his secret. Obina's body, specifically his manhood, was larger than most men's. At first, he didn't think it would be a problem, but over time it became clear that it was. Obina had tried to be with a few women. They were excited to be with him, but whenever they saw his body, fear took over. One woman, Ada, had run away from him, crying. Another, Nkechi, refused to talk to him after their first night together. Soon, the whispers started spreading through the village. People began to talk behind his back. Mothers warned their daughters to stay away from him, saying he was not normal. The gossip grew worse, and Obina felt more alone every day. It didn't matter how much he smiled or how kind he was. All the women in the village saw him the same way, as someone to fear. The men in the village didn't help either. Some of them were jealous of him, while others pitied him. They never spoke about it directly, but Obina could see the way they looked at him. His best friend, Chidi, tried to comfort him one afternoon as they sat under the shade of a big tree. Chidi was a farmer, and he and Obina had grown up together. They often shared their problems, but this time, Obina felt like there was no solution. "You should leave this village, my brother," Chidi said. "You're too big for this small place. People here will never see you for who you really are. In the city, people don't care about things like this. There are many opportunities, and you will meet new people." Obina was silent for a while, thinking about Chidi's words. The idea of leaving the village had crossed his mind many times, but he didn't know if he was ready. Ukaru was his home. His family was here, and everything he knew was in this village. But as the days passed and the loneliness grew, he realized Chidi might be right. He couldn't live like this forever. That evening, after another failed attempt at starting a relationship with a woman named Ifeoma, Obina decided to visit his grandmother. She was the one person who had always treated him the same, no matter what people said about him. His grandmother, Mama Nkechi, was sitting outside her hut, weaving a basket. Her hands were steady, even though she was old, and her eyes, though full of wrinkles, were sharp. When she saw Obina approach, she smiled and waved him over to sit beside her. "What troubles you, my son?" she asked in her soft, comforting voice. Obina sighed, sitting down beside her. "Mama, I cannot stay here any longer. The women fear me, and the men talk behind my back. No matter what I do, they will never see me as anything more than this." Mama Nkechi nodded, her hands still weaving the basket as she listened. "This village is small, my child. People here do not always understand what is different. But that does not mean you are cursed." Obina shook his head, feeling frustrated. "What am I supposed to do, Mama? I want to find love. I want a family. But no woman here will give me a chance." For a moment, Mama Nkechi was quiet. Then she stopped her weaving and looked at him directly. "Obina, sometimes to find what we want, we must leave the place we know. If your heart tells you to go, then go. The city is different. There, you can be anyone you want to be." Obina listened to her words carefully. His grandmother was wise, and she had never led him wrong before. He knew what he had to do, even though it scared him. That night, Obina made his decision. He would leave Ukaru village. The next day, He packed a small bag with his few belongings and prepared to leave for the city. It was time for a new beginning, and though he didn't know what the future held, he knew he couldn't stay where he was any longer. The journey to Zaluba city took several days. Obina traveled mostly on foot, occasionally catching rides with traders passing through the villages. As the landscape shifted from rural fields to busy roads and sprawling townships, Obina's nervousness grew. The city was nothing like Ukaru. It was loud, chaotic, and full of strangers who barely glanced at him as they rushed by. But that was what he had hoped for: anonymity. At least people would not gossip about his manhood here in the big city. Zaluba city was a place of endless possibilities. Towering buildings lined the streets, cars and buses moved in a constant flow, and the air was thick with the smell of food, fuel, and sweat. Obina wandered through the markets, overwhelmed by the sheer volume of people. In Ukaru, everyone knew everyone, and there was always someone watching. Here, no one cared who he was. He blended into the crowd, unnoticed, and that was a relief. His first few days in the city were difficult. He found lodging in a small room above a bakery, where the smell of fresh bread woke him each morning. The room was simple, with a narrow bed and a small window overlooking the busy street below. It wasn't much, but it was all he could afford. He spent his days walking through the city, trying to find work as a carpenter. The city was full of noise and movement, but work was harder to come by than he had expected. At first, no one would hire him. He would approach workshops and offer his skills, but they looked at his large frame and doubted he could do delicate work. Some dismissed him without even giving him a chance to show what he could do. Others promised to call him back, but never did. Each rejection weighed on him, but he didn't give up. He couldn't afford to. Finally, after several days of searching, Obina found a small workshop in need of an extra pair of hands. The owner, a wiry man named Chukwuma, looked him up and down, his sharp eyes lingering on Obina's broad shoulders and muscular arms. At first, Chukwuma seemed skeptical. He wasn't sure if someone as large as Obina could handle the fine, detailed work his shop required. "Do you know how to carve?" Chukwuma asked, his tone doubtful. Obina nodded. "I've been working with wood for years," he said confidently. "Give me a chance, and I'll show you." Chukwuma hesitated for a moment, but then nodded. "All right," he said. "I'll give you a trial run. Let's see what you can do." Obina picked up a piece of wood and began to work. His hands, despite their size, moved with the precision of a master craftsman. Within minutes, he had carved an intricate design into the wood, shaping it into a beautiful chair leg. Chukwuma watched in silence, his doubt slowly fading. When Obina finished, Chukwuma nodded in approval. "You're good," Chukwuma said, his voice impressed. "You can start tomorrow." Relief washed over Obina. He had finally found work, a place where he could use his skills and earn a living. He thanked Chukwuma and left the workshop, feeling lighter than he had in days. As he walked back to his small room, he allowed himself to hope that perhaps things would be different in the city. Maybe here, no one would care about his size, and he could live a normal life. But despite the relief of finding work, Obina couldn't help but feel lonely. The city was full of people, yet he felt more isolated than ever. In Ukaru, he had always been surrounded by familiar faces, even if they whispered behind his back. Here, in Zaluba, he was just another person in the crowd, invisible and alone. One evening, after finishing a long day of work, Obina found himself wandering the streets of Zaluba, his thoughts heavy with doubt. The city lights flickered above him as he walked aimlessly, unsure of where to go or what he was looking for. He passed by shops food stalls, and crowds of people going about their lives, but none of it felt real to him. As he turned a corner, he noticed a small art gallery tucked away on a quiet street. The windows glowed softly in the fading light, and inside, sculptures of various shapes and sizes filled the space. Obinna had always admired fine craftsmanship, whether in wood, stone, or metal, and something about the gallery drew him in. Curious, he stepped inside. The gallery was quiet, the walls lined with beautiful pieces of art. Sculptures of all kinds stood on pedestals, each one more intricate than the last. Obinna wandered through the gallery, admiring the skill and dedication it must have taken to create such masterpieces. That was when he saw her. Obinna stood frozen as he saw her. She was standing near a large stone sculpture, her back turned to him. Her hands gently traced the smooth curves of the piece, her fingers gliding over the surface with familiarity and care. She was tall, with dark skin that seemed to glow in the soft light of the gallery. Her hair was tied back, revealing the sharp lines of her face and the delicate slope of her neck. She was tall, with dark, glowing skin and a presence that seemed to blend perfectly with the art around her. Her hands moved gently over the smooth surface of the stone, as if she were in conversation with it. There was something captivating about the way she stood, so at ease in the quiet space. When their eyes met, she smiled, a warm, welcoming smile that put Obinna at ease. He wasn't used to feeling comfortable around strangers, especially in this new city, but there was something about her that made him feel seen. The woman, Celine, introduced herself as someone who worked at the gallery. She spoke passionately about art, and as they walked through the gallery together, she explained the stories behind many of the pieces. She talked about the artists and their process, her words flowing with the same ease as her movements. Obinna listened, his usual self-consciousness fading. They moved from sculpture to sculpture, with Celine sharing her thoughts, not just on the art but on the deeper meanings behind it. Her love for what she did was clear in the way she spoke, and Obinna found himself drawn to her calm energy. In one corner of the gallery stood a sculpture of a woman seated with her head resting in her hands, her expression somber. Celine paused before it, explaining how it represented solitude and contemplation. Obinna felt a strong connection to the piece. The woman's quiet sadness mirrored the loneliness he had carried with him, both in Ukaru and here in the city. As they continued their conversation, Obinna shared some of his own stories, revealing pieces of his life in the village and the struggles he had faced because of his size. He spoke less about the details and more about the feeling of being trapped, of never fitting in. Celine listened closely, her face full of understanding. She didn't judge him. Instead, she reminded him that his identity was not defined by his body, but by the passion he put into his craft. Her words resonated deeply with him. For the first time in a long while, Obinna felt truly seen, not for his physical appearance, but for who he was beneath it. Obinna felt a strange reluctance to leave as the evening wore on and the gallery prepared to close. He had found comfort in Celine's presence, in the way she understood things he had never been able to explain to anyone else. But as he said his goodbyes, she encouraged him to come back anytime, an invitation that filled him with hope. On his walk back to his small room above the bakery, Obinna's thoughts lingered on Celine. The city had been overwhelming and lonely, but meeting her had changed something. For the first time since his arrival, he felt like he might have found someone who could look past the judgments and the whispers and see him for who he truly was. Meanwhile, Celine was not always the confident and calm woman who now walked through the gallery with such grace. Her journey had been shaped by hardship, much like Obinna's. Born and raised in Zaluba city, she had grown up in a modest home, surrounded by the constant noise and rush of city life. Her parents were practical people, focused on survival and success, and art had no place in their world. But for Celine, art was everything. From a young age, she was drawn to the beauty of creation, the colors, the textures, the way emotions could be captured in a single sculpture or painting. She had spent her childhood sketching, molding clay, and dreaming of a life where art could be more than just a hobby. However, her parents had different plans. They wanted her to pursue a more practical career, something secure, something respectable. Celine had tried at first to meet their expectations. She went to school, studied hard, and even began training as an accountant. But her heart was never in it. The numbers and spreadsheets felt like chains, holding her back from the life she truly wanted. After years of struggling to live up to her parents' standards, Celine made a decision that changed her life. She chose to follow her passion, even if it meant disappointing those closest to her. She left her accounting career behind and threw herself into the world of art. It wasn't easy. Her parents were angry, and her early years were filled with financial struggle and self-doubt. But slowly, through determination and hard work, Celine carved out a space for herself in the art community. She worked her way up, eventually finding a home at the gallery where she now spent her days surrounded by the things she loved most. This journey had shaped Celine into a woman who knew the value of following her heart, even when the path was difficult. It had also taught her the importance of acceptance, of people, of differences, and of oneself. She had learned that life wasn't about fitting into molds set by others, but about creating a life that was true to who you were inside. The days after their first meeting passed quickly, and Obinna found himself drawn back to the gallery often. His work at Chukwuma's carpentry shop kept him busy, but in the evenings, when the day's noise faded, the quiet refuge of the gallery became his escape. There, he could lose himself in the art and in the company of someone who seemed to understand him in ways that no one else had. Celine welcomed his visits, their conversations flowing easily. They spoke of art and life, of the struggles they had both faced in trying to be true to themselves. Obinna found her honesty refreshing, and in Celine, he saw someone who had fought her own battles and emerged stronger. But even as their friendship grew, there was a part of Obinna that remained guarded. The city had given him a fresh start, but the weight of his past still lingered. He had left Ukaru to escape the whispers, the judgment, and the rejection that came with his physical difference. Yet, in the quiet moments, he wondered if Selene, with all her kindness and openness, could truly accept him if she knew the truth. One afternoon, as they sat in a quiet corner of the gallery, Obinna decided to open up a little more. The gallery was empty, the soft light from the windows casting long shadows on the sculptures. Celine sat across from him, listening as always, with an open heart. "I didn't just leave my village for work," he said after a long pause. "I left because I needed to get away. Back home, people saw me differently because of how I am." Celine didn't press him for details. She had always respected his need for privacy, and she knew that everyone had their own burdens to carry. She listened quietly, offering him the space to say as much or as little as he wanted. "In Ukaru, I felt trapped," Obinna continued, his voice low. "No matter what I did, people only saw my body. I was never enough, or maybe I was too much. That's why I left. I wanted to find a place where I could just be myself." Celine nodded, her expression thoughtful. "The city gives us all a chance to start over," she said softly. "It doesn't matter where we came from or what people thought of us before. What matters is what we choose to do now." Her words struck a chord with Obinna. He appreciated the way she didn't ask for more than he was ready to give. Selene understood the struggle of trying to live up to expectations that didn't fit, and she had found a way to create her own path. For Obina, it was comforting to know that someone like her, someone who had faced her own challenges, saw him for who he truly was, without judgment. As the weeks turned into months, Obina's life in Zaluba City began to take shape. His carpentry skills quickly earned him a reputation for fine craftsmanship, and as word spread about his work, more and more customers came to Chukwuma's workshop looking for pieces crafted by Obina's hands. Tables, chairs, and intricately carved doors bore his signature style, and soon he had saved enough money to take a leap of faith. With Chukwuma's blessing, Obina opened his own carpentry shop, a modest space tucked into a bustling corner of the city. He filled the shop with pieces of his own making, sturdy furniture, hand-carved decorations, and intricate wooden sculptures. It wasn't long before business thrived, and Obina found himself more settled than he had ever been. But his professional success wasn't the only thing falling into place. His relationship with Selene, which had begun as a simple friendship, was now something much deeper. The two spent more and more time together, whether at the gallery or in the comfort of their own spaces, talking late into the night about art, life, and their dreams. With Selene, Obina felt something he hadn't allowed himself to feel in a long time: hope. Despite how smoothly everything seemed to be going, a quiet fear lingered in the back of Obina's mind. As close as he and Selene had become, there was still one part of himself he hadn't shared, the same part that had driven him to leave Ukaru in the first place. The weight of his past, of the rejection he had experienced due to his size, still haunted him. Though his life in the city was thriving, the fear that Selene might see him differently if they took their relationship further kept him from fully letting go. One evening, after a long day at his shop, Obina invited Selene over to his apartment for dinner. They ate together, laughing and talking as they always did, the conversation flowing effortlessly between them. But as the night wore on, the atmosphere shifted. The connection between them had grown undeniable, and both of them knew it was time to take the next step. When their eyes met across the room, there was no need for words. They drew closer, the distance between them shrinking as they finally allowed themselves to acknowledge the feelings that had been building for so long. In the quiet of the night, they kissed for the first time, their lips meeting with a softness that held both tenderness and longing. As the evening deepened, one kiss led to another, and before long, they were lost in each other. That night, for the first time, they were intimate, completely vulnerable, without holding back. When the morning light filtered through the window, Obina lay beside Selene, his heart full, but his mind uneasy. He couldn't keep the truth hidden any longer. She had to know about the part of him he had kept secret, the insecurity that had followed him from Ukaru to Zaluba. Turning to face her, he hesitated before speaking. "Selene," he began, his voice low, "there's something I've been afraid to tell you." She looked at him with curiosity, her expression gentle. "What is it, Obina?" Taking a deep breath, he continued. "Back in my village, the people, they didn't treat me well. They judged me because of my body, because of my size, my manhood. It's larger than what's considered normal, and it scared them. No matter how kind I tried to be, they could only see that part of me. That's why I left. I was afraid no one would ever look past it, and I thought maybe you would feel the same way." For a moment, Selene was silent, and Obina braced himself for her reaction. But then, to his surprise, she laughed softly, not out of mockery, but with warmth and affection. "Obina," she said, shaking her head, "you've been worrying about that all this time?" Obina blinked, taken aback. "Well, yes," he said. "In my village, it was a big deal." Celine chuckled again, then reached out to touch his hand gently. "Maybe the villagers overreacted. I don't know what they thought, but to me, it's not a problem at all. You're perfectly fine. And more than that, Obina, I don't see you for just your body. I see you for who you are. The man I care about, the one who has a beautiful heart and talent. That's what matters to me." Her words were like a balm to his soul, and Obina felt a wave of relief wash over him. He had spent years carrying the weight of his insecurities, believing they would always stand between him and love. But now, with Celine beside him, he realized that those fears had no place in the life he was building. As time passed, Obina's life in Zaluba city blossomed in ways he had never imagined. His carpentry business continued to thrive, with more clients seeking out his finely crafted furniture and intricate woodwork. His reputation as a skilled artisan grew, and soon Obina found himself in demand across the city. But it wasn't just his craftsmanship that attracted attention. He began to notice the way people looked at him, not with fear or judgment, but with admiration and curiosity. Unlike in Ukaru, where his large manhood had been the subject of gossip and whispers, Zaluba city seemed to have a different view. In fact, what had once been his greatest insecurity was now seen as an endowment, something that many people in the city considered a sign of strength and virility. Obina's confidence grew as he realized that he was no longer bound by the narrow-minded views of his village. Here, in the city, he was free to be himself, both as a craftsman and as a man. His relationship with Celine deepened, and she continued to remind him that he was valued not just for his appearance, but for his heart and talent. With her support, Obina learned to embrace the parts of himself that he had once considered a curse. One evening, as they sat together in Obina's apartment, the glow of the city lights shining through the window, he turned to Selene with a smile. "I've been thinking," he said, his voice thoughtful. "It's been a long time since I left Ukaru. I want to go back just for a visit. I want to see my grandmother, and I want to show her the life I've built here. I also want to catch up with Chidi, my friend who advised me to leave the village. He was right about everything." Selene looked at him with warmth in her eyes. "That sounds like a good idea," she said. "I'd love to meet your grandmother, and I think it's important for you to go back. You've grown so much since you left." Obina nodded. He had grown, not just in success, but in how he saw himself. The boy who had once been afraid of the villagers' whispers had transformed into a man who stood tall, proud of who he was and the life he had built. A few days later, Obina and Selene set out for Ukaru village. The journey was familiar, but this time, Obina felt a sense of peace rather than anxiety. He was returning not as the insecure young man who had fled, but as someone who had found his purpose and learned to embrace his true self. When they arrived in Ukaru, the village looked much the same as it always had. The small huts, the dusty roads, the fields stretching out in the distance, it was all as Obina remembered. But this time, something had changed within him. As he and Selene walked through the village, Obina could feel the eyes of the villagers on him. But this time, he wasn't afraid. He wasn't ashamed. He had grown beyond their judgments, beyond their small-mindedness. He walked with confidence, his head held high, and for the first time, he didn't care what they thought. Some of the villagers whispered as they passed, surprised to see him back after so long. Others simply watched in silence, unsure of how to react to the man who had returned so different from the one who had left. But Obina didn't pay them any mind. His focus was on the people who mattered, his grandmother and Chidi. When they reached his grandmother's hut, Obina's heart swelled with emotion. Mama Nkechi was sitting outside, her hands busy weaving a basket, just as she had been the day he left. Her face lit up with joy when she saw him approach. "Obina, my son!" she exclaimed, rising slowly from her seat to embrace him. "You've returned!" Obina held her tightly, the familiar scent of home filling his senses. "I have, Mama," he said softly. "I've come back to see you, and I've brought someone with me." He turned to Selina, who smiled warmly as she stepped forward. "Mama Nkechi, this is Selina. She's been with me in the city, and I wanted you to meet her." Mama Nkechi's eyes sparkled as she took Seleni's hand. "Ah, so this is the woman who has captured my grandson's heart," she said, her voice filled with affection. "Welcome, my dear. You are very welcome." The three of them sat together outside the hut, sharing stories and catching up. Obina told his grandmother about the success of his carpentry business, about how life in the city had allowed him to grow in ways he had never imagined. He spoke of how Selene had been his constant source of support, helping him embrace his true self. "I'm proud of you, Obina," Mama Nkechi said, her voice soft with emotion. "You found your way, and you've built a life for yourself. That's all I ever wanted for you." Her words filled Obina's heart with gratitude. The blessing of his grandmother, the woman who had always believed in him, meant more than anything. It was the final piece of closure he needed. Before leaving Ukaru, Obina made sure to visit Chidi. His old friend was still the same, tending to his farm with the same dedication he had always shown. When Obina found him in the fields, Chidi greeted him with a wide grin. "Obina, you look like a new man," Chidi said, pulling him into a tight hug. "I knew you'd make it in the city. I'm glad to see you've come back." The two friends sat under the shade of a big mango tree, just like they had in the old days, reminiscing about their childhood and the conversations that had led Obina to leave. Obina thanked Chidi for pushing him to follow his heart and for helping him see that there was a world beyond the narrow confines of the village. "You've done well for yourself, my friend," Chidi said, clapping him on the back. "I'm proud of you." With his grandmother's blessing and the support of his old friend, Obina felt a deep sense of fulfillment. His time in Ukaru had come full circle. He had returned not to reclaim anything, but to show the village and himself that he had grown beyond the whispers and judgment that had once held him back. As he and Selene left Ukaru and returned to Zaluba city, Obina walked with a renewed sense of confidence and purpose. He no longer carried the burden of his past. He had embraced who he was, his talent, his body, his spirit, and with Selene by his side, he felt ready to continue building the life he had always dreamed of. With Selene by his side and the blessings of his grandmother still fresh in his heart, Obina knew that he was ready to move forward without fear or hesitation. The years that followed were filled with growth and new beginnings. Obina's carpentry business continued to flourish, expanding beyond his expectations. He was no longer the young man who had once doubted his worth. Instead, he had become a respected craftsman in the city, with clients seeking his work from all corners of Zaluba. The pride he felt in his craft was matched only by the pride he felt in the life he was building with Selene. Selene, too, continued to thrive in her own work. Her sculptures gained recognition in the art community, and she became known for her ability to capture emotion in the most delicate and powerful ways. Together, she and Obina supported each other's dreams, finding joy in each other's successes and comfort in their shared struggles. Their love, built on trust, respect, and a deep emotional connection, grew stronger with each passing day. Like all couples, they faced challenges, moments of uncertainty, difficult decisions, and the everyday struggles of life. But they faced those challenges together, knowing that their bond was stronger than any obstacle they might encounter. Every trial they overcame only deepened their love and strengthened the foundation of their relationship. Through it all, Obinna never forgot the lessons he had learned on his journey. He had come to understand that love wasn't defined by physical perfection or societal expectations. It wasn't about what others thought or how they judged. True love was about finding someone who saw you for who you truly were, someone who accepted you without judgment and loved you in ways that transcended the superficial. Selene had been that person for him. She had seen beyond his insecurities, beyond the whispers of his oversized manhood, and had embraced the man he had become. With her, Obinna had learned that love was about acceptance, trust, and the willingness to be vulnerable. He had found in her a partner who understood him, who supported him, and who loved him unconditionally. Together, Obinna and Selene had redefined what it meant to love and to be loved. And as they stood side by side, looking toward the future, Obinna knew that whatever came their way, they would face it together, stronger, wiser, and more in love than ever.